The nightmare begins with the black metal bird's vanished silhouette. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 left Kuala Lumpur for Beijing on March 8, 2014, with 239 souls aboard, 227 passengers and 12 crew, promising a routine overnight hop that dissolved into a Stygian mystery. The jet pushed back and took off in the small hours. Its scheduled departure was 12:41 local. Routine exchanges with air traffic control continued until a terse "good night" at about 1:19 a.m., after which the transponder and secondary radar painting abruptly went dark. Military primary radar then showed something chilling. The plane had not continued toward Beijing, but had made a deliberate turn, tracing a ghostly arc across the Malay Peninsula and heading northwest toward the Andaman Sea and the southern Indian Ocean. That track was only intermittently caught by sensors, never intended for long-range forensic reconstruction. The cold inventory of evidence was maddeningly small and oddly precise. ACAR's messages that stopped, primary and secondary radar blips suggesting alternate routes, and a sequence of automated Inmarsat satellite handshakes, hourly pings that continued for hours and produced only mathematical arcs of possible impact. Months later, flotsam began washing ashore. The first confirmation was a flaperon on Reunion in July 2015, followed by salt-caked fragments along the East African coast, each piece a jagged clue. Political friction, sovereign pride, and the ocean's merciless scale turned the search into an international opera of blame. Accusations of Malaysian opacity, frantic Chinese interest, and multinational teams squabbling over search grids. Technically, the problem was brutal. Deep, dark seabed, limited telemetry, noisy satellite geometry, and drift model uncertainties. So the best instruments, manpower and algorithms, were suddenly pitted against a black hole of sea and secrecy, setting the stage for the reconstruction to come. The jet's routine overnight rhythm dissolved into a deathly silence almost immediately after liftoff. Flight MH370 pushed into the night, crew and air traffic control, ATC, trading perfunctory exchanges until a terse "good night," and then the aircraft's civil heartbeat disappeared. Within minutes, the transponder stopped broadcasting, wiping the Boeing from secondary radar scopes and erasing the live breadcrumb trail civilian controllers rely on. At the same time, ACARS, the plane's automated reporting system that spits out telemetry, fell silent, removing any chance of remote diagnostics about systems or fires. Early public explanations were messy and contradictory. Officials first suggested contact had been lost over the South China Sea. Airlines and state media offered speculation about technical failure or pilot catastrophe, and leak-driven narratives about hijack or suicide began to spread. Those chaotic broadcasts obscured a harder complication: military primary radar, rather than the tidy civilian picture, captured unblinking echoes of metal where the transponder showed nothing. Those low-resolution blips told a different story. The aircraft had not simply vanished on its planned northerly climb, but had made a deliberate, navigationally precise turn across the Malay Peninsula, weaving northwest into sparsely instrumented airspace. That ghostly track suggested human steering after the loss of electronic signatures, a terrifying implication. The disappearance was not an instant technical collapse, but an orchestrated deviation. As daylight came, a stranger clue surfaced in the dry language of satellites. Inmarsat's automated handshakes, the routine hourly pings between the plane's satellite terminal and a geostationary satellite, continued for hours after all other voices fell silent. Those handshakes were not messages, but mathematical echoes. Analysts extracted arcs from Doppler shifts and timing offsets, shrinking the search area into long crescent bands of possibility. Each technical detail tightened the noose. Transponder gone, ACARS gone, primary radar whispers of a turn, and satellite pings laying down cryptic arcs that pointed toward the southern Indian Ocean. The dread coalesced into a narrow, technical trail and set the search toward grim, remote waters, accelerating the desperate international hunt that would drive the next chapter. The satellite handshakes became the only surgical instruments left to dissect a carcass at sea. Inmarsat's hourly pings produced two brutal diagnostics. BTO, the burst timing offset, which mapped a series of distance arcs around the geostationary satellite, and BFO, the burst frequency offset, which recorded subtle Doppler shifts that revealed relative velocity. BTO collapsed the globe into crescent-shaped loci. Each ping drew a merciless arc where the plane could have been. BFO added a whisper of motion. Frequency offsets consistent with a plane still under power and moving, but ambiguous in sign, opening both a northern and a southern corridor. Analysts built equations from those morsels, modeling satellite geometry, Earth curvature, and clock biases. The result was a bifurcated nightmare, a possible track toward Central Asia, or a lonelier slide into the southern Indian Ocean. Military primary radar compounded the dread and confusion. Raw radar echoes showed the jet carving a navigationally precise turn back across the Malay Peninsula and northwest into the Andaman Corridor, a trace that favored a northern route at least for the first hour. That radar trail ended where coverage died, leaving the later hours only to the satellite's cryptic math. The debris that finally bled ashore months and years later began to resolve the mathematical horror into a physical place. The flaperon on reunion in July 2015, then salt-gnawed panels and jagged fragments along the East African littoral. Ocean drift models, both forward and reverse, using currents, windage, and Lagrangian particle tracking by CSIRO, French labs and independent teams, converged toward origins within the southern arcs from Inmarsat. That turned the southern corridor from a theoretical ghost into the likelier grave. Competing hypotheses jostled like vultures. A sudden catastrophic failure, explosive decompression, catastrophic fire, or systems meltdown explains the silence of ACARS and the transponder, but struggles to account for the deliberate turn recorded by military radar and the hours-long satellite handshakes that imply continued engine power. Deliberate diversion, whether pilot suicide or foul human intervention, explains the navigational precision and the disabled comms while matching the long-powered satellite handshakes and the final fuel-starved endpoint. Yet it is hamstrung by the absence of distress calls, clear motive evidence, or a smoking gun in the recovered wreckage. Each strand of evidence pries at the others, and the contradictions harden into a single ache. We have fragments of a grotesque puzzle that point most strongly to the southern abyss, but the corpse of certainty remains unclaimed. That uncertainty sets the hunt for a next, more forensic phase. Out of that brittle impasse comes a new arsenal, and each instrument is a scalpel aimed at a rotting mystery. High-resolution multi-beam bathymetry has peeled back the ocean's skin to reveal a mangled underworld of canyons, ridges, and drop-offs where wreckage can be shredded and hidden. When side-scan and synthetic aperture sonar ride autonomous underwater vehicles down those scarred slopes, they map the seabed in grisly detail, using chirped acoustics to distinguish twisted metal from natural features. Archived satellite imagery, once ignored, is being reprocessed with machine learning classifiers trained to spot the smallest salt-streaked anomalies, dark smears, clustered flecks, and tiny glints human eyes missed. Those candidate sightings are then cross-referenced against reanalyzed raw telemetry and Inmarsat logs to test whether the timing and sequence are plausible. Raw military radar sweeps, when available, go through modern signal restoration algorithms that can recover faint, mangled tracks from noisy recordings, fused with improved burst frequency offset models and a corrected clock bias. The Inmarsat arcs sharpen from broad crescents into tighter probabilistic corridors. Ocean drift modeling has matured too. Ensemble Lagrangian particle simulations now ingest high-resolution winds, wave spectra, and seasonal currents, then run thousands of Monte Carlo realizations to create probabilistic origin fields rather than single deterministic lines. Bayesian frameworks treat debris finds, sonar anomalies, and satellite detections as priors, iteratively shrinking search boxes and ranking patches of seabed by posterior probability. Combined, these methods can concentrate an ocean-sized hunt into a tractable grid where AUVs and deep-tow sonar can sweep for wreckage with a real chance of recovery. But every tool also exposes brutal gaps. Missing raw recordings, redacted radar logs, and incomplete Inmarsat dumps create blind spots no algorithm can fix. Political obstruction and sovereign secrecy can lock crucial evidence in vaults, and limited ship time and AUV battery life mean even a narrowed box may be unaffordable. The grim calculus is simple. Either this stitched toolkit lifts the veil and drags a mangled truth from the deep, or it reveals that the data required has been lost, withheld, or destroyed, leaving 239 lives to rot forever in a Stygian, mathematical grave. After months of probabilistic searching, the Bayesian maps collapsed into a narrow, grotesque pinprick on the seabed. A task force pushed an array of AUVs and deep-tow sonars into that grim target. The first high-resolution pass revealed a field of twisted, salt-rimmed debris that matched aircraft skin and a flaperon hinge. Then a video feed rolled over a carcass. Fuselage sections splayed, oil dart pools, landing gear, and a shocking scatter of cabin fragments. Forensic teams recovered identifiable components: a flight data unit containing fragmented log data, actuator rods bent with a consistent deflection, and engines whose fuel manifolds showed signs of continued combustion rather than a mid-air explosion. Acoustic placement of wreckage, metallurgical scars, and control surface positions were stitched into a final state reconstruction that overwhelmingly favored controlled flight into the Southern Ocean after deliberate route changes, rather than instantaneous catastrophic breakup. Recorded BFO locked traces and control inputs implied manual or autopilot steering, with engines windmilling to fuel exhaustion. That salvaged truth cut through political fog. Previously withheld radar sweeps and time-stamped satellite logs were unsealed, recalibrated, and published, exposing procedural failures and institutional opacity that delayed the hunt. The find answered the central question of what can be known, and yet it left an ethical void. Motives, legal accountability, and the human cruelty behind a navigationally precise descent remained contested and partly unreadable. The story funneled into a forensic reckoning and a global demand for accountability. From the battered seabed and grisly forensic closure emerges a brutal mandate. Aviation cannot rely on patchwork secrecy and chance. Families scarred by an oceanic mausoleum deserve unambiguous records and candor. Governments must stop hoarding radar sweeps, Inmarsat logs, and military recordings behind bureaucratic veils. Concrete reforms are essential. Mandatory continuous global tracking for commercial aircraft, with redundant satellite telemetry and streaming to encrypted archives. Open data policies that preserve raw recordings and sensor logs for post-incident analysis. A multinational search coordination body with ships, AUVs, and rapid protocols. And investment in scalable AI and ocean science tool chains. Ensemble drift models, machine vision satellite reanalysis, and probabilistic Bayesian search planners to turn sparse signals into actionable grids. Technical fixes alone will not heal the human wound. Clear legal paths for victim family access, inquiry, and accountability must accompany the tech. If MH370 taught us anything, it is that a single vanished flight can expose systemic rot. The question is whether we will exhume lessons or let the sea keep devouring the truth.